And we're live streaming to you from historic Founders Park in Ocean Grove, New Jersey. We are Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Thank you so much for joining us for our unique podcast community, where we explore the triumphs and challenges of the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished artists. And we want to thank you so much for helping us grow. We just hit 1,899 subscribers, so be the next one to subscribe to get to 1,900. And we're so delighted that people are watching and joining us. And please reach out and let us know what you're looking for in terms of guests and topics. We're always looking for the next guests and stories to tell. To see our almost 300 past episodes, check out our website at www.jasontram.net. Again, that's www.jasontram with two M's.net. And we have a wonderful guest today. We have Dr. Thomas Juneau with a very snazzy hat. So I saw his hat, so I threw my hat on. So we're here today and in Ocean Grove to talk about some music.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Jason.
So Thomas, I've known you for a few years now, and it goes back. And so delighted to finally have you on the show. One of my favorite people, one of the most interesting people I know.
Oh, thank you. And same here, man. I mean, it's an honor to be here, and I'm really excited your show's going so well. Sounds like you've had a lot of success with it, and I want to shout out to Quentin, who's over there running the behind the scenes. He's the man, and yeah, man, we've known each other since I was thinking about it. Is it 2004?
Yeah, had to be. Yeah, back in the Rutgers days, we both did our doctorates at Rutgers under the very, very venerable Patrick Gardner.
That's right. At good old Rutgers, you were one of my first best friends in New Jersey because I had moved from Cincinnati. And
so you come from a family of artists. So tell
yes.
us about your artistic journey.
So I grew up in a family of musicians. My mother was a choir director for 44 years and wrote a lot of textbooks on choral singing. She wrote the Hal Leonard Essential Elements books, both editions. She was a major writer for those, and some of the Glenn Co textbooks. And my father was a band director, and so I grew up in that tradition. And yeah, that's what. So I was in high school. I was in band and choir and orchestra and did all the things. And
what was your instrument?
I played the French horn.
I didn't know that. That's right.
Yeah, I was a horn player. And then like in marching band, my senior year, I was the drum major. But then they also had me play the piano because band directors decided to do the Gershwin Piano Concerto in F. And I had no idea what I was doing, but that's okay. It was down in the pit. It looked really cool, and I could go chord. So I've gotten a little better since then, but yeah. And Mom's work, especially. That's also how I got to meet Joseph Martin.
Joe Martin's a good friend. He's been on the show, and he's been it's so much fun.
Yeah. So when mom commissioned the Awakening, the piece, one of Joe's big pieces, and that's what got me into composition. Mom was doing. She was on a committee for the Texas Prescribed Music List, which is this list of pieces that the choirs have to choose from when they go to contests.
So now you've lived all over the country. Tell us the importance of choral singing in Texas.
Choral singing in Texas is a big tradition. It's a major tradition. It's one of the reasons it's so strong is the education system down there really, really appreciates the extracurriculars. And back in the 60s and 1960s and 70s, they fought in the state government to make sure that it stayed in there. And so therefore, that's why band is so big down there, choir is so big, just like football. And they have a real commitment to the arts. So the students get a very high level of education. They have to go to an annual competition, which is their assessment, really, the University Interscholastic League. And they get evaluated by a panel of judges, of course, in both concert and sight reading. And so the students have to be able to come in there in that sight reading room and be able to solfege, so the teaching of solfege and hand signs is very important, things like that. So, it's like Texas football, very competitive. And, so it's, but had a lot of great experiences, singing there. I sang in high school choir. We went to convention twice. We sang pieces like the Barber Reincarnations, things like that, so some really great stuff. And yeah, so all of that, it's a big giant scene down there, and it still is.
So you finished your high school experience. You were the drum major. You played horn, and you're obviously deeply entrenched with your mom and your family. What was it like now you decided to go to music school? How did you know you wanted to go into music for a living?
Well, so in high school, the other thing I did was I was first published when I was in high school.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. So I wrote these pieces The Three Sea Shanties, published by AMC Music.
And they're still out there?
They're still out there. I get a little royalty check every year. I'm like, look at that. And somebody rediscovers them every year. And they're on that list, that UYL list. And now I have a lot of pieces.
What was it like to get on that list with all these immortal composers?
It was scary. And I mean, I was a 17-year-old kid, and I didn't really realize it. My choir directors who had mentored me, helped me get published and things like that. Really, they did. And like one day, it was third period choir, and out of the blue, the principal shows up in the choir room, and I'm going, and they go, "Is Thomas Juneau here?" And I go, "God." They found out what I did or something like that. That was my first thing I thought. And they go, "Come up here, Thomas." I'm like, "Oh God, what is this? What did I didn't mean to do it, whatever." And as it turns out, they were giving me a certificate for getting published.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And so it was really fun. So that's what my mom, who I hope she's watching, mom wanted me to be at first an orthodontist. She was like, "Thomas, you're orthodontist."
A family of musicians.
Nice.
She wanted to.
She was like, "Be happy. Don't be a musician. Don't be a musician." And I'll never forget, one day I asked her, I was in the ar, I was like, "Is it okay if I do music?" And she was like, "Well, of course." And I mean, I couldn't help it. My dad listened to John Williams nonstop and choir, all the stuff. So yeah, that's I just knew. It was just in me, like it's just in
there
us.
was never an option. Yeah, I didn't come from a family of musicians, but I just always had. There was never the other options, and I kind of like sometimes you wish like, oh, I wonder if I had gone that direction, what it would have been like, but I never had that. It's just fascinating.
Even when I think about it today, I go, oh, I would be so miserable. I wouldn't be fulfilled. And
everyone asks, like, hey, it's a lot of work because we both do a million different things. I know your schedule and my schedule, and we can almost never get together because we're always doing a concert or you're on tour or I'm on running around here and there. It's so hard, but you never get tired because the music can sustain you through each project.
The music keeps fulfilling. Well, yeah, talk about being busy. I mean, we've known each other for like ever, and for 18 years, and it took me this long to be on the show because this is how busy we are. And because it's nonstop.
Yeah,
it's relentless.
We have seasons, and it's like this season starts and this season begins, and then this project starts, and then I go on tour, and then this
exactly, and all the planning. Like right now, I mean, people are like, "Oh, it's summer, you're not doing a lot." Well, no.
All the music ordering and programming and collaborations.
Yeah, I'm trying not to do a lot, but no one's letting me do that. And no, so so being a musician, it's challenging. It's it's a hard hill to climb. You have to persevere. I know we've both seen people who that didn't work for them, and it takes a lot of sacrifice. A lot of sacrifice. And one of the reasons I'm here, is after Cincinnati, after I did my master's in conducting at CCM, was I wanted to be in New York City. And I knew I'd met Richard Westenberg, who founded Musica Sacra in New York City and stuff like that, and I knew I wanted to be here. And then meeting you, and you're such a great entrepreneur, and you know how to make things happen musically and with productions like this, was very inspiring. And between the two of us as students at the time, we could see that. And when we were conducting the orchestra, I was thinking about. Sorry, I know I've jumped it a little bit, but
there's no script here. We can go wherever you want.
Okay, I was thinking about when Johns wanted us to
shout out to Kynan Johns at Rutgers University, one of the great conductors in this area.
Oh yes, and a great teacher.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great teacher. We had to learn what was Rite of Spring, right? And we split it.
It's insane. That was a rehearsal, right?
That was a rehearsal. We had to do the sectionals or something. And
he was in Spain.
Yeah, kind of was in Spain.
And I was in the hospital, and Mason was just born.
That's right.
So I didn't sleep for like 3 days. Studying.
No, exactly. Because I had to babysit Quentin. And so that was the Kerry Bush election. That's right. What I always remember. So Mason, I think, was born on the night of the Kerry Bush election.
You walked in and saw Mason. He's 17 now. He's going on tour with Gibby Hayne of the Butthole Surfers in 3 weeks. Oh, he's doing great. Boston and Philly, and he's right now performing on the boardwalk and getting tips. And
it's awesome. That was so funny. He walked out with that bucket, with his orange bucket, and like 25 drumsticks.
He plays a reclaimed drum set when he does the full thing.
Oh, cool.
And it's got like pots and pans and a little bass drum thing. And everything sounds like he plays like jazz and fusion, and people are taking like he does like it's pretty. We used to make fun of him, the family, like his sisters, and like, what are you talking about? You want to do this on the boardwalk? Okay, and then he like winds up like making it a thing.
Oh, yeah, that's fantastic. You know, it reminds me at Wagner, I teach a class in science fiction movie soundtracks, and one of the classes.
By the way, Thomas is a professor at
yeah.
Wagner College. He's the director of choral activities and is been a huge force of change in that program and doing great work. I've just seen and heard from so many people. And plug for Wagner College, a great Lutheran
friend.
School in Staten Island.
Yes, Staten Island. And one of the pieces we studied in the class was movies was Planet of the Apes, and it was the Jerry Goldsmith soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
And the use of steel mixing bowls during the scene when Charlton Heston goes in, they all go into the cornfield and the ape soldiers are coming after them and wrangling the humans up, and there you hear that. And I was studying this.
What is that?
And it was these mixing bowls they had found, and so this whole aleatoric idea that like Jerry Goldsmith and some of these composers, especially him, incorporate in their soundtracks. It just reminds me of Mason a little bit. And
the percussionists are fascinating. Like watching a developing percussionist, because everything is musical and everything can be played. And watching him and his friends, like he invented he called it a tompany, and he's actually bringing it on tour with him because Gibby Hayne loved it because it was his idea. It's a floor tom with a hi hat up and down, so he can change the pitch. Oh,
that's fantastic!
And it's foot controlled, and it's like he calls it a tompany, and the guy was like, "That's the coolest thing I've ever seen." So we figured out how not to break the heads while he's doing it, and how to it's crazy.
That would be being patented, I expect. So,
like, what are you doing that floor tom? He's like, "Don't worry, don't worry."
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, and you're huge into film scores. We've been talking about that since I met you. Like you've always been into film scores.
Yeah.
Have you written any?
No, I haven't pursued.
I see that as something down the road.
That would be a lot of fun, and we've been. I did my. I was very fortunate to have my professional choir sing on the movie soundtrack for the movie Frontera.
Ah.
Yeah, Ken Lample wrote the soundtrack for that. And that movie has Ed Harris and Ava Longoria and Michael Pena in it.
Did you get to the premiere?
Yeah. Well, no, they streamed the premiere or something like that. Yeah, it was.
Bummer.
They didn't fly us out. I wish. Although it was a lot of fun. So Ken Lample, he wrote the soundtrack is very Western, and like a spaghetti Western kind of, and it's this very romantic score. And he said. He reached out. He asked John Baker, the audio engineer, and if they had a choir, and John recommended mine, and so we got this random gig. And Ken was like, "Thomas, I already knew Ken from some other work. Ken's
fine composer,
great composer, and he's written a lot of movie soundtracks.
Jersey based, I believe.
Jersey based, and at that time he was living in East Brunswick, and now I think he's in Australia. And and I follow his adventures on Facebook. And
he was touring with he was scoring for Foreigner. I thought that was really cool.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, those are the kind of gigs. Yeah,
it's interesting.
He had some great stuff, and he was talking about Eric Whittaker was one of his students, or one of his colleagues. I'm sorry, at Juilliard, and or one of his students. No, one of his students, because Ken was the graduate student.
He was at the same time as Karen Delavan. He plays for me at Ocean Grove, and was a dear friend.
Exactly.
And, it's a small world.
Yeah, and but anyway, so movie soundtrack. So we were thrilled to do this, but it was really funny because we kind of did it lo-fi. We recorded the soundtrack with the choral parts in my church, and of course, Ken had we went old school. We had this headphone patch thing where you could plug 20 headphones in it. And everybody was going to, and I'd asked all these people to come sing. I was like, "Who wants to sing a movie soundtrack? We can pay you almost nothing."
With that. No problem.
And everybody's like, "Yes, we will be there." There they all are. Like, I haven't seen you people 5 years, but you're here for this. Okay,
that's how I do every project.
Exactly. It's just
party afterwards.
Oh, exactly. That's the way it works. If you don't have a party afterwards, you're doing it wrong. And people who know me know that one, or know us. And so these headphones. Okay, it's reminds me of 1980s show choir. Okay, it's not that kind. And of course, Ken is the sweetest person in the world. And so he was very, but we were all a little nervous. We were doing this. And suddenly the choir, some of them had headphones for monitoring, and some did not. And the headphones started, they just started going out. The cables just, it was old. It was old stuff.
What are you going to do?
And they started pointing while we're doing the takes. They're pointing to their ears going, "I can't hear." And I'm like,
was the music really hard?
No.
Okay,
it wasn't big off.
Sometimes they do those kind of headphone things when they feed you your pictures because the music's so hard that people need their, because they were doing that with it was a live premiere at ACDA of an Arvo Pärt piece that was so complicated that the Estonian radio choir needed their pitches fed to them.
Oh, really?
Can you imagine how hard that must have been?
Oh my lord!
I've seen that. It was the same for a couple of the really avant-garde operas. Like the choir can't sing it, so they'll just put them in the pit with they're giving their pitches.
Oh yeah, I believe it. And this was not that. And and I was going, guys, you're like some of the top professionals in the country. You could just sight read this. Just follow me. I've got the click. Just stay right here. You'll be fine.
I do film score like some pops concerts. We have click tracks, and it's like such a wacky thing to me. It's so annoying.
It's crazy. I went.
We go to school to become conductors, and then it's like click.
Well, this is fascinating because I started teaching movie soundtracks. I didn't know this history. For instance, Max Steiner created the click track, and he created it for King Kong.
Really?
Yes. So he had been hired, I believe, by Warner Brothers. And I just discovered all this. And of course, he made significant contributions. I mean, King Kong is what put film music on the map because of its orchestrations, and it
was that one of the first?
1933. Yeah, one of the first movies with sound like that. And he convinced the studio it needed an orchestral soundtrack. And Max Steiner had studied in Germany. They'd escaped during before the war. He'd gotten out before, which was good because a lot of people did not. And but he came up with the idea of putting holes in the film on the side. This was before they had the soundtrack part and the little, and it clicked, and that's how he figured this out. He was like click click click, and King Kong was the first film. And they talk about how that just transformed film music, because before that, it had all been movies like. They would have maybe an organ or something playing for the movie, right? An organist would be there accompanying the film or something like that. And then orchestras began to become a thing in the 20s. And so for film. And of course, it was Eric Korngold who didn't need the click track. And that's one thing that just blows me away. They talk about, they finally got Korngold. They rescued him out of Nazi Germany. It quickly was becoming Nazi Germany. And he got out. They gave him this great contract. He only had to write 6 scores a year. Wow. Steiner was writing like 20, but Korngold could take his projects as he wanted. He didn't have to do it if he didn't feel like it. There's a great documentary on BBC4 about all of this. And so Korngold wrote the Robin Hood soundtrack, which is fantastic, things like that. But they talk about how he didn't need that. He just knew how he had his own system. He never told anyone what it was, which stinks. And it's so cool, right? And he could just time it all perfectly, just with the music. And of course, Eric Korngold is the person that like Richard Strauss was intimidated by, and because Korngold was a child.
One of the great violin concertos for sure.
Exactly, and operas, Die Totstadt, and stuff like that. And highly advanced romantic music. And so, yeah.
We always talk about the death of Italian opera, and it's right around the 20s. And I don't think we ever died. I think it just became, opera was the synthesis of all the art forms that became film.
Well, of course. Yeah. I mean, it's the Gesamtkunstwerk, right? Yeah. So it goes back, you're adding
animation and CGI
right.
and film score and... It's everything.
It goes back to, it even goes back to like the English Mask, right? And of like, what, the 1600s, something like that. And that used machinery, right? And they used machinery in these shows.
Baroque opera, love that.
Yeah, Baroque opera.
Going back and forth. And the Deus Ex Machina. And,
right, exactly. And things had to get bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So like music, I was teaching a summer class on Monteverdi, which was a blast, and because the student she was great.
You're a Monteverdi fanatic.
Oh yeah, you know me. Yeah. And that was a very interesting thing. When I saw Pat Gardner, we were talking about pieces for post-COVID, and he said, and somebody asked him at the table, they said, "Did you find a piece to celebrate the end of COVID?" He goes, "Oh, I sure did. I found Monteverdi's Selva Morale that was actually written to celebrate the end of the Venetian plague in the early 1600s. And the thing that was fascinating with that is that there was a convent, of course, with a bunch of nuns in it, and they were sequestered off from the rest of the city just because they were nuns. And when the priest would come in to give music lessons, they had to do it behind the choir gate. So there was no contact. There was social distancing. So the nuns never got sick. So anyway, they found this Monteverdi. He found this Monteverdi piece, which is a blast. And but yeah, so Monteverdi with the operas and getting things growing. And yes, that just obviously turned into
The first
film.
genius of opera.
Yeah,
He was
exactly.
the first. There were a lot of experiments, but he was the first like genius
Yeah.
who took that art form and can do things with it. And he was the master of both of the styles of his day, and he could just freely go back and forth and borrow. And I just love his like wild modality. It just sounds so interesting.
Oh, it's so good. You know, the whole idea is to affect the emotions, right? And because it was coming out of Renaissance polyphony, which of course had been all codified and had to be very structured so that they could keep music in the church. And with Palestrina, of course, and so Monteverdi coming out of that wanted to change things, right? The second practice, right? So we're reliving our doctoral days, and
There'll be a quiz at the end.
there will be. And so, but I played recently. I played some Monteverdi for a dear friend she had never heard it before, and I said, "Okay, now have your wine while you listen to this." And then we were all sitting around just going, "This is the best thing."
The Vespers of 1610 is literally my favorite piece in the world.
Oh, they're so good. And Book 8 of the Madrigals, just heaven, just transports you. So
I like to explain people like the genius of this man. Like he invented so many things we think of as standard, like pizzicato. Like that was never a thing until it was in a Monteverdi score, Combattimento di Tancredi and Clorinda.
That's right.
It was the punch of they were punching each other, and like those things that we just assume or have always been there were invented. Were used and codified by him.
Exactly. I mean, everything had to be created. You know, that's like when our students these days take like this for granted, the phone, or things like that, or just film, or going to the movies or streaming, God help us, and
we're doing that.
And so these things had to come from somewhere. But going back to the movie thing, the opera certainly turned into that. It just changed the venue changed.
Yeah.
The
platform.
The platform, exactly.
The great composers have always been there. The great creative minds have always been there. The output of those minds just shifts.
Well, and that's why I started teaching these film music courses, because that's where so many of the great composers are. Of course there's John Williams, but there are so many others, and I just watched him conducting something on TV the other night. And
was he 85? Or is he 90?
He's 90, 91, yeah. And of course, there's all that great music which comes out of the Wagnerian tradition, and
certainly Holst.
Yeah, exactly, Holst, and so yes, no doubt. And that's where it all is. People just kind of dismiss it sometimes, and
it's incredibly well written.
Yeah,
can't dismiss that. Like whenever I've done the Star Wars suite and stuff like that, watching it come together, you're like, look how hard the parts are individually. Like, oh my lord, the players like love to take pictures of like some of the bars, like
it's like, which is easy if you're a really good pianist, like the composer.
But when you watch that stuff, and my friend, one of the drummers I put on one of the shows, he went to school with John Williams' brother. They were really close friends, so we were talking about oh yeah, we talk about this all the time, and like how he writes, and like it's just fascinating to see how much he absorbs like the things of the past and puts it in, and he's affected so many people through his art.
Oh, and he does it in so many different ways. And I mean, I didn't realize, for instance, so that romantic tradition that he followed was because George Lucas had cut Star Wars to Die Valkyrie or something, or to Wagner, and so he wanted that. I found in a garage sale for $1 an untouched, pristine, perfect record, the Star Wars or A New Hope movie soundtrack from 1977. It still has the movie poster in it.
Oh, worth a lot of money.
Yeah, and it has John Williams' program notes. I know. I'm like, I know. I've thought about it, and has John Williams' program notes, and he goes, "I hope this movie will be a success." And, but the movie soundtrack, and he starts explaining, he gets little lighter notes. And,
it's like a spaghetti western, but set in space,
and
right?
That's where a big part of opera went, was like, good, the bad, like spaghetti westerns, good, bad, and the ugly. I mean, they could all be singing arias and stuff like that. And, but with John Williams, what's fascinating to me is, like, in the 60s, I didn't realize he had written the score for like Valley of the Dolls, and those psychedelic kind of ones. And he's actually in a scene in Valley of the Dolls where they go to a party, and he's the pianist at the at the little cocktail hour. But to watch these traditions, nothing's died, nothing's gone away. I still think in many ways we never left, the Baroque period. I think the Romantic period was just an extension of all that.
The tastes just change. maybe some of the harmonic vocabulary.
It expanded.
And I always
Got
tell
more
my
interesting.
undergraduates, I teach a music and civ type course, and that everything in society changes. They seem like a violin's the same, but the strings have changed, the composition of the strings have changed, the instrument, the way, even though the instrument was kind of finalized in the 1500s, the bow structure has changed, the projection of the instrument, everything has changed.
Well, that's the technology, right? That's technological development.
And that's for every instrument that's happened. We've invented new instruments along the way. We keep on adding and subtracting and testing the limits of what's possible. And I think that's just human nature.
Yeah, well, it goes back to what you were saying about Mason's. What's it called? The
Timpani.
The timpani, and things like that. I mean, that's the technology just being continually, created and developed. And that's the thing. People don't usually think of like a cello as a piece of technology.
It's absolutely.
And that's what it is.
It's got a solo's got to project above a 60 or 100 piece orchestra. It's got to have screen power and and the technique behind it's changed over the years as the demands were changed. I just think it's fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. And the human voice is the same way. It has to be, developed, and it's still a piece of technology. It's an organic technology, and but it has to be developed to sing, especially if you're doing opera.
As concert halls were developed and orchestras got bigger, so the voices had to be steeled up and.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a fascinating.
It's
nothing like big voices.
No, nothing like big voices.
That's the reason opera is enduring, because we're so used to microphones and having amplified voices that when people realize that the unamplified voice can be so exciting, it is visceral in its own way.
Yeah, exactly. And some people are intimidated by that, and which I see sometimes, and they're like, "Oh, they need a microphone." I'm like, "No, they really don't." And so it's cool. It is a cool thing.
Now, you are a science fiction fanatic.
I am, yes. A little too much.
Share that with the concert-going audience here. So tell us about your favorite movies and some of your favorite pop culture.
So I grew up watching Star Trek and with my mom. And so we always watched, we watched William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, God bless him. And
thank you.
Yes.
I appreciate it.
I've had the honor of meeting William Shatner 2 times.
What was he like?
Oh, he's funny. And he's been in the business so long. I mean, he's the old guard. And he was Alexander the Great in 1951, and he this whole show, and he talks about it. It's where he learned to love to ride horses. That show was so much fun. I had to go back. And Lauren, who I was with at the time, was like, "Do we really have to go back?" I was like, "Yes." And so then we actually bought the tickets to go meet him after, and so we go up, and I take my picture with him, and he's very nice. He's like, "Okay," and of course they're all anyway. And so I'm just sitting there waiting for her to get her picture taken with him. I'm sitting there talking to him, and she was the only person to do a selfie with him. Everyone else is like old school, and she goes, "This is okay." And he goes, "Well, isn't that what that thing's for? Is the selfie?" That's what he said to her. And then I say something to him. He goes, "I think your turn's done now." And I go, "Yes, Mr. Shatner, thank you so much." And he goes, "Thank you." So he was great. And you're like the old guard conductors, kind of, And but yes, as far as like science fiction goes, so I grew up on that. Then of course, we were Star Wars kids. I mean, 1977, I always say I'm a Star Wars kid. And so grew up with all of that, with the movie soundtracks and the whole 9 yards. And then getting into reading, I read a lot of fantasy as a kid.
Sure,
me too. Yeah. I read all the Dragonlance
Lord
books.
of the Rings fanatic.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings, and all of that stuff. Anything like that. And
I think it goes with if you like opera, I think all that is in the same realm.
Yeah, it's all, we have these romantic ideas,
And whenever I conduct a symphony, it's like I try to come up with the world that symphony lives in. And that's what we do. We create worlds. We're storytellers.
Well, exactly. And and so learning it through reading. I always say, because reading, you create your own worlds in your mind. That's a major difference.
I've heard that reading is fundamental.
Reading is fundamental. And so, I not to go to college professor.
Whenever I make Quentin laugh, that's good. That's a good sign. When I make Quentin laugh, it's a good joke. He cringes at some of the dad jokes, but I have 4 kids, so I can tell dad jokes. So.
Yes, I think you've heard that.
I put disclaimers to my college students. I'm like, this is a dad joke. I'm just warning.
Yeah, with the college students though, I tell them all the time. I say, just read. Please read a book. Yeah. Don't listen to the book on audio. The audio reading of the book, with the textbook. Try to sit there and read it and learn. And I was like, also, write the way they write. Learn.
Vivid, yeah.
We talk about it with going back to off topic a little bit, but with composers, you know, one of the way like Johann Sebastian Bach learned how to compose was he saw his family's manuscripts and he got manuscripts and he copied them, and that's how he learned to write, because he didn't have formal training because they were a musical family. But anyway, I tell the students, I'm like, you know how this book is written that we're reading right now? You should try to write more like that, you know, and look how they're doing that. So it's so you know, it's so anyway, yeah. So back to science fiction novels. Dune is definitely Frank Herbert's Dune.
What do you think of the new Dune?
I enjoyed it. It was
I did too.
Different.
Very different. I remember the old one when I was a kid, and this one was a little darker, a little more gritty, which is popular today. But
yeah, I grew up on. I actually saw the David Lynch film first.
Okay.
And before I read the book, and I was in college. I was an undergrad, and I was like, "What is this?" It was on really late on like the Disney Channel or something like that back in the day, and I'm going, "What is this sandworm? Who are these people with the blue eyes? And why is this so psychedelic?" And of course, it was David Lynch who had made this entire psychedelic film. He had Toto write the entire soundtrack. You know?
That's right. I remember.
Yeah,
we had Toto here at Ocean Grove a few years ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
Before they stopped doing the concert series. Yeah, I got to meet the guy. I'm like,
so great.
Pop Bless the Rain.
Yeah, exactly. And like, and so David Lynch is a huge music buff, and so that's why, and he always makes very eclectic choices for his film composers.
Awesome.
And yeah, so Toto was like completely out of left field. It wasn't John Williams or anybody like that, but I loved it. I mean, you know, the use of the guitar and, you know, like that 80s sound, which was, you know, and was very, very powerful to me, actually. And yeah, so the new film I liked. I liked the romance of the old film. However, having read the book, I do appreciate what they did in the new Dune with attention to detail from the book. And I'm like, oh yes, that's exactly how that should be. That makes a lot more sense. And because David Lynch created a lot of different things that are not in the book, and so
director's artistic license.
Yes, artistic license, and then he never talks about the film. So, but I like the new soundtrack. You know, it was cool. It actually incorporated some of the Toto themes. Like the Water of Life themes in there just in it. I'm like, oh, the Water of Life themes in there. And of course, but going back to Toto just for a second with Dune, you know, that melody was so popular back then that, I mean, it's even in Beetlejuice. Do you remember the sandworms in Beetlejuice that ends up eating Beetlejuice?
That's so funny.
The Dune theme is when Alec Baldwin opens the door. Yeah, it's the Dune theme. So that music's, like we've been talking about, like with Monteverdi and people like that, that music was very effective affects people and emotions. And so, yeah, so I started reading Dune, and I couldn't stop. I read, I shouldn't say this out loud, but I sometimes I'm a church musician and I sit at an organ a lot. And once you memorize all the hymns and you can do the liturgy blindfolded and upside down, that you can, I used to read a lot. And it's back like when I took the train from New York and I could learn the scores, you know, and it's like that. So I had a book. I read, so Dune has 27 books now in the series, because after Frank Herbert wrote 6, then he died of cancer, and then his son kept it going.
Keeps expanding.
Yeah, so awesome. I just put it on Kindle and just click on through it, and so I just devoured the Frank Herbert books. I mean, the Asimov books are brilliant with Foundation, and one of my good friends is reading them right now, and she's like, these are so cool. They harken so much to, you know, so many great tropes in science fiction, and, you know, but yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I, you know, I try to never stop reading, and sometimes, you know, it gets hard.
What are you reading right now?
Busy. I'm actually reading the new Stephen King. It's not that new, but it's a trilogy he just wrote about Wendy.
I read about that.
Yeah, and it incorporates elements of the Dark Tower series. Yeah. And
that movie was just dreadful.
Oh, it was horrible.
They wasted Idris Elba too. He's so good.
Oh, and Matthew McConaughey. And like, dude, I mean, like they had the Palanthers.
Good performances, but terrible writing.
It was just
the worst.
It needs to be 7 movies, and it just needs to be. And they need, you know, well, they just needed not to like cram it all.
It's just
together.
like good, you know, a bad librettist can ruin an opera. Look at some of the Verdi operas, like look at Trovatore. Even though it's a great musical opera, the libretto is like rough and tough, and you know that's why they don't go the pantheon of the great ones. It takes the librettist has to be just as good as the composer, and people often don't realize that. And with a Hollywood movie, even Matthew McConaughey and Idris couldn't save that movie.
You can't save it. Yeah, exactly. They have to have a great script. You have to have a great script, and well, that's why Mozart's operas are so are so successful.
The DePonte
Operas.
Yep.
Yeah, the guy who ended up in Brooklyn or whatever, right? And
He's buried in Queens.
he's in Queens. I'm sorry. Is it Queens?
Yeah, he opened. Yeah, what a story.
He worked at the grocery store or whatever.
We're gonna be Quentin and I are gonna start doing some short form content where we trace the footsteps of the composers.
Yeah.
So we're gonna actually track down DePonte's grave. We're gonna try to do that because some people say it's lost to time, and I've heard other people say no, we know exactly where it is.
Oh.
But the thing has changed over the years. They don't know exactly which grave it is, but
Let me know. I want to go.
it's fascinating, isn't it? Like, it's fascinating to see where the final resting place of these people is.
Yeah. Yeah.
His life is
all
an
over the world.
opera. I've had friends who wrote books on him. Like, we've had people on the show. One guy wrote a book on him as like meeting Mozart, and he was driven out of the 3 places in the 3 biggest cities. He was kind of like a wild scoundrel, womanizer / priest /
Oh God.
He was kicked out of Venice, Vienna, and London.
Oh my.
For scandals.
Oh wow. He was consistent.
Yep.
But not Queens.
No, well, he came and he founded the Italian program at Columbia University.
Oh, that's right.
And then he tried to become an entrepreneur in New Jersey by opening up a grocery store. Then went to Philadelphia. That failed. Then he went back to Columbia and he died there.
Oh really? Oh wow.
He brought opera to some of the operas to New York City. He was very fascinating man.
That's crazy. He usually is so overshadowed by Mozart that people don't think about it because sometimes people don't think about the librettist.
They just don't. But if you don't have a good librettist, the story is not going to make cohesive sense.
That's like the joke, right? When they're the script writer, like, no, it must be like this, blah, blah, blah. They're making films all the time now, and blah, 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 arguing all the time and things like that. But it's so true. It's
now,
so true.
you're quite a busy composer. Now, how many published pieces would you have if you had to estimate how many you have? What's in the market?
I have around 80 published compositions.
Congratulations.
And thank you. Like I said, I started when I was in high school, and I one of the things with writing, I studied composition at Texas Tech with Steve Paxton, who was at University of New Mexico for a long time after that.
Stephen Paxton was on the show. He made a comment before about the Planet of the Apes being his favorite film score.
Oh yes, see, we have good taste, and I'm a good student. I learned, and
I love to see colleagues on these shows. You never know who's going to show up on these things. It's the wildest thing.
Steve would go in. We would have
shout out Steve Paxton.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. And we would have we had studio lab, and every week. And Steve was the experimental composer, and although he plays piano beautifully, and he took me through the Beethoven symphonies, and gosh, I wish I could have played them. And he played them, so it was great. And and we learned form, and he took me through all of those things. And I was a bit more of a traditional composer, but he was the one who had the setup and like all the electronics and like. When Finale was, Finale pioneering in Finale and things like that. And it was just, it was things I had never seen before. He had an awesome studio room and in the music building that had all of that stuff in it. Just, racks of processors and things like that. It was so cool. And so I've primarily, as you know, focused on choral music and that's, and vocal music. So I've written a lot of music for like music for school choirs,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of pieces for that, for different voicings. When I was at Texas Tech, I wrote a setting of Alva Somnes for women's choir, which still does really well to this day. And there's been some really nice recordings of it.
What's it like to be a composer, to see your music be recorded and to be like put on YouTube? What's it like being a composer and seeing that happen?
It's an honor. It's flattering, and it's exciting. And I think the only thing I would say about it the only thing I would like to say is, I wish people would let me know. People, they don't realize, and I understand this. Like, you disassociate. You get that octavo.
The human with the
you get that, and you see like Thomas, who's the composer. Okay, great. And
it's happened several times. I've been on judging a festival or working with a high school choir, and they're doing one of your pieces. I'm like, selfie, tag Thomas. Thomas will respond.
I'm like, hey,
awesome.
I mean, exactly. That happened. That's exciting. And like, there's this great performance I found of like. It's the San Francisco Bay Area chorus or something like that, and of doing my Gaudete, not the one we wrote for Ocean Grove, but the one I did for choir, a cappella choir, and like handbells and clapping and chimes and stuff like that, and it was awesome. And so I won't lie, sometimes I do, just to see what's going on, I'll type my name in, and I'll
You've
be
done
like,
that? I've never done that.
yeah, I know, right? We never do that.
My son's laughing.
Like, we never do that, right? And because I'm like, there's a big part of me. It's like, should I do this? And I'm like, yeah, who's gonna know? But now I just told everybody. And but I guess we all do that.
I think so.
So far it's all good. And never know, the principal might come get me. Yeah, but I just type it in sometimes, and these new performances from all over the world, like this Swedish treble choir that was singing some of my the Carl Fischer treble pieces and then some of the Hal Leonard stuff, and they sound great. And it's really cool though to hear different regions, people from different regions, different parts of the world perform the music and how different it can sound.
Yeah, once you put it out there, it becomes, it's a international thing, and it's got its own life. I just find that fascinating.
Yeah, it's cool. Like the Swedish choir, for instance, sang it very like a Swedish choir would. It's like a Swedish community choir, and very high level, but with very closed sound and things like that. But it was cool. And then the choirs in South America sing with this beautiful, bright, open tone, and they've done some great performances, which is it's cool, and and so it's fun, and it's fun to see how people. And then sometimes I'll listen to the piece and I'll go. Because, first and foremost, when I write, I approach it as a conductor. Like, there are a lot of pieces where I go, I want this piece to be, and of course I have my editors like Denise Eaton at Carl Fischer, who is so wonderful and been so
Such
patient
important
with me.
people. Yep.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and as I've been building Wagner, I haven't had as much time to write. And but you listen to it and go, I could have made that easier. Like, and sometimes I'll be conducting my own pieces, and I'll be like, we're going to do this year. Great, we pay, everybody gets it. We're in, whether it's Wagner or Summit Chorale or whatever, and
do you revise the pieces that are in the catalog? Have you ever done that?
I once in a blue moon, like if there's a misprint, and which is actually fine. I learned a good lesson about that. There was a misprint and in a piece, and the head of the company just said, just let it run, let it sell, and when it's time, we'll
run
just
a second.
run it. We'll run a second. No, don't worry about it right now. No one's gonna notice.
Interesting.
And but yeah, sometimes I'll notice. And so for instance, revising pieces though, you can put pieces in different voicings. So this might be a little technical, but for instance, if I write a piece for a treble choir, for soprano, alto, and then they're like, oh, we really like that. The publisher, it sells really well. Or it gets like, so the music distributor company, J.W. Pepper, they have like editor's choice. And so I've gotten a few editor's choices, which is very nice. When that happens, the piece sells really well.
Wow.
And so they go, the publisher will say, can you revoice this? And the first time I did it, I completely revised the piece. And I sent it to them, and they were like, Thomas, no, we need it like exactly as it was, just with an extra couple voices. Yeah.
Huh.
They were like, we don't need a new piece. We just need the exact same piece. And I learned it. So, and that's how you learn it in the trade. And if you have people who are really kind and supportive, in the industry, it who will tell you things like that, and you're like, oh, okay, give me a little time. And they're like, sure, no problem.
It's pretty fast. We've had lots of choral composers on the show and talk about this, like the business of making music, like how to write at the level that you're marketing towards. Because each of these companies has different tools that they market.
Yes,
it's kind of fascinating.
You have to, if you want to be a professional composer. One of the reasons. I've always composed, and I was very lucky that I had some contacts when I was young and things like that. But I've also submitted things blindly to companies, and they've got that I had no contact with. And for instance, E.C. Schirmer, I sent my setting of Virga Jesse Florowheat, my second setting of that.
That one does really well.
Yeah.
I've conducted that several times at my Christmas concerts. Everyone loves it all the time.
Man.
I'm like, I went to college, and they're like, what? You know Thomas Juneau? I'm like, oh, yeah.
Well, the story, and then I want to talk about how the industry itself, with getting published. The story, I sent it to Stanley Hoffman, who was the editor at the time, and Mark Lawson's the owner. And it had been rejected by another company. And I was like, I'm just going to send this to E.C. Schirmer. Because E.C. Schirmer, Randall Thompson, they've got a pretty serious catalog.
Stable
Gwyneth Walker, some great composers that I really like. And Frank Furco, some serious composers. And so I email it to them, and it's in the recording that we had done with the professional choir. And I got a email from Stanley the next day. Here's your contract. How's that kind of turnaround for you?
Whoa.
And I was like, yeah.
I found something they liked
right
right away.
A day. Well, it was really good because it had been rejected by another company. And I was like, I think this is a good piece. I worked really hard on it, And
it's got to be for their target market.
Know, yeah. And so that goes exactly. And you have to know, if you want to write and get published, So often what composers forget and is that writing to just write for music's sake is very different than writing to get published. And when you write, these publishing is a company, or publishing is an industry, I'm sorry. And just like, people forget about things like Tin Pan Alley, which was all they were doing was trying to sell to market the next great hit.
Yeah.
And we're going to Ireland in a few weeks, and I'm arranging some of these songs, and some of them are just Tin Pan Alley songs that became hits because of movies. So, that was that whole thing. So people forget that that it's an industry, and and a lot of people, and it's easy, a lot of people take it personally if the publisher rejects it, and you can't take it that way. It's very hard though to learn that lesson, because this is I've written more than 80 pieces, and most of my pieces are not published. And
what advice? Now we'll loop back to the publishing.
Yeah.
What advice do you give to students and colleagues and new people in the business on handling rejection? Because isn't that a huge part of the musical career for any artist?
Oh, it was a challenge. Heck, for us, after,
never ends.
we've all not gotten more jobs than we've gotten. And I think the most important thing is to persevere, is to stick with it, keep doing good work, and to realize that this is what you were saying earlier. While music it's a incredibly challenging profession, and people who are able to make it professionally as musicians are very fortunate people, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of patience, and you can't judge yourself, and you have to realize, you have to remember always how much you love music. That's number one, but you also have to understand that we're always improving ourselves as musicians. Music is a language. We don't learn languages overnight. It takes time. And so, but then also getting jobs and things like that, the industry itself, it just takes time. It takes forever.
Connections, contacts, it never ends too. It's always, you're always reinventing it. You're always innovating in different ways. And
you got to decide what's important. And, I tell people, like, when they're going to do their doctorates, or they're going to do their terminal degrees, or their master's or their doctorate, I tell people, I say, when I did this, I decided I wanted to be in the New York City area. And so that's one of the main reasons I went to Rutgers, was I wanted to establish myself here.
People don't realize how few doctoral programs there are and what we've studied in this region, and there's only a few spots in each.
Oh, yes. And so, like, the doctoral programs are very, very competitive. And so, but for instance, I wanted to teach college no matter what. I always wanted to. So, I was an adjunct at St. Joseph's University, in Philly off the main line for a long time. And I drove down there every Monday, and
if you want to be in the college market, it's a national job market. And, that's the challenge.
You've got to have that.
You have to either move to, I was offered 2 university jobs, one in Whitewater, Wisconsin, and one in somewhere else down Valdosta, Georgia.
Down in Valdosta.
And that's kind of like, you have to move and be ready to move. And I wasn't to do that either. I was going to stay in New Jersey. And New York.
I love it here. I think, we're able to establish so many great things and have so many great opportunities. Like, for instance, a fun one is we both conduct the Messiah Singing at Lincoln Center every year. That's when we finally get to see each other.
Make friends.
We have a huge network. And the network
I got COVID last year at the Messiah Sing.
Oh, you did not?
Me and Mike Fennelly both got
COVID. Oh, God.
He called me. He's like, I have COVID. We went out to dinner afterwards. I'm like, oh, yeah, I got COVID too.
Oh, no. I'm so sorry.
We were wearing masks, You
tried. Well, sometimes
we were socially distanced, but we had dinner afterwards, I guess.
It's going to beat everything. I tell you, it seems like it. I'm still waiting.
I'm glad they did it, though. I'm glad we're back to starting to do the concerts and doing music. And, it was so hard during the period not performing. And
no, we had to go. We had to, and we still need to get back to all of that. And for so many reasons. But we have to, keeping our organizations running, getting people in seats, getting people in the ensembles, enrolling in schools, the whole 9 yards, no more of that. That fear can't just be. It just comes to time. And even my doctor friends, they're like, it's time. Like, I'm like, we can either start having everything live, or we can close the organization. Just which one
all of society
are we doing? Yeah,
and only take things via like Amazon Prime and
exactly.
There comes a time when restaurants and most of society can't function. We can do some things remote, but we can't replace some things remotely.
No, and we can't replace human contact. Like, during the pandemic, we all know it sucked, and we didn't get to see each other and things like that. I know we were all incredibly lonely, and I've never been that depressed in my life, and I'm not usually a depressed person.
Well, we're people who are used to being in front of large groups of people all the
all
time.
the time. Yeah, we're
Zoom screens just don't cut it.
No. And like when we were on lockdown and college was ending, and I was on with my choir students, and we were supposed to go to Italy, and we had to cancel the tour. We get full refunds, and I had so my students decided for their last choir class, they were like, Dr. June, we have a presentation. And I'm like, oh, okay, because we're all so depressed. And I mean, literally, the choir had just sung at Carnegie Hall on March 8th, and then the lockdown was that next week, and so like they just everything was shut down. Like, and Wagner actually said the next day they were going. We were that Monday. They were like, we're going, going remote. And so the presentation. There they all are on Zoom. Okay, there they all are on Zoom, and they're like, okay, we're going to play the presentation now. I'm like, guys, what is the presentation? And he said, well, we wanted to do a presentation on Italy. And I was like, this is going to be the most depressing thing.
Here's a picture of the Colosseum.
And we had this, so there they all are, exactly. They did a Google map walkthrough. And so I had a student, and she was sitting there with this giant bottle of wine. And I'm like, I just look at her. It's the last day of class, whatever. I mean, and I just look at her, and I mean, what am I gonna do? Reach to the screen and be like, don't do that. Yeah. And she keeps. The more we got into the presentation, the more wine she poured. And I was like, are you okay over there? She's, I'm really depressed, Dr. Juneau. I was like, well, thanks for a great year.
We all saw such an incredible, this past year was really difficult for getting society started again. I mean, just seeing all the challenges that my students faced, and like they would come talk to me, and we were all, all my colleagues was noticed, and on the podcast we talk about this, like the mental health toll of this is still going to be felt for decades.
Oh, it's an entire little sub-generation, and people are, and students especially, and children as they're developing, miss those 2 years. Literally miss 2 years of development.
I have elementary schools where everyone's like 2 years, their skills are like, we're rebuilding the foundations of things, and it's...
And that's how I know we've talked about this a little bit, that's how it was for me with some of my freshmen, and they're wonderful students.
Oh, sure.
But a lot of those social interactions and those developments they didn't have. Like, they didn't have their end of the year activities. They didn't have all of those things. So they're coming in and this is socially, and they haven't had it. It's not anybody's fault except COVID. And
a reality that we're all
reality.
facing, and we're going to be we're in this together. But it's as teachers, that's our job, is to take students where they are and to bring them to the next level, and with humanity and care. And you always have to remember that moving forward. I know with all the choral societies and different groups I connect, even the singers in the professional level, everyone was a little rusty. Getting back on this on the horse is a little challenging. Yeah,
there's that, and then I mean people who had COVID and it really affected their voices.
Every production now we have a serious double cast, like we're doing In the Heights. Or Navi had COVID. We're like, we had to boogie and make sure that everyone's covered, and everyone's back now, knock on wood, but the show opens next weekend. But it's like, I would never do a production now without a full cover cast, a legit cover cast. Yeah. It used to be like an honorary thing. Put that on your resume. Right. Now it's like, no, you got it. You're ready to go.
Actually
tag in.
Yeah. It's very true. And I mean, and we were, I was just on tour with the Wagner College Choir in Italy, and we had to test to come back. That was the United States requirement. It's not there anymore.
Did everyone pass?
We did. We were 100% clear, and we did better than some others and some other groups. And but
I had a Juneteenth concert, and my concertmaster was stuck in Germany. She was on a cruise with her husband, and he got a little bit sick, and he got tested positive. They were fine, but they tested positive, so they were stuck in Germany for an extra 2 weeks, and they were like quarantined off. So we had to, anyway.
No, exactly. COVID, what do you do?
2022, you just say, well, next.
Yeah, exactly.
Make it work.
Yeah. It's been a real challenge, and but it's good to see. It's great to see people coming back together. And
what's something you've learned about yourself through going through the COVID period?
I've learned about myself. I've learned that if I have to really multitask like that, I can, which is good. I've also learned that it was a incredibly frustrating, and it was a lot of expectations were put on a lot of people that should never have been placed upon them. And for instance, when I at Wagner, I co-teach a freshman class, and I taught it with this wonderful history professor, Allison Smith, who's retired, and she was a great mentor for me. But they stayed at their house, and during the first semester, we were hybrid, and for health reasons, and that, of course. So she would Zoom in every day, and I would have to set everything up in the classroom. Wow. And I had to learn to like check the Zoom boxes and do all these things, and I would forget it. I would yell at myself, and I was like, I can't curse out loud on Zoom, and things like that. And oh, I can't make that joke. But there were a lot of people that was. I mean, in the college, and I know all the schools did, they provided all the technology and all of these things, but suddenly you had to learn all the technology. Yeah.
But integrating that into what we do was like, I had to learn so much time. I'm not a technophile to begin with. It took me a long time to get comfortable.
No, and I actually, we made some videos, but we didn't make that many. And we actually, that semester in college choir, I said, you know what, that first semester back, I said, let's just have fun. Because spirits were so down.
Really down.
Everyone was so depressed, and people were getting quarantined for like 14 days, and like they couldn't come out of of the room, and then they would finally come back out, and it looked like they had been in prison for and so I just said, so we did, that was fun. We actually did Pirates of Penzance that semester.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. I said, why don't we just do Pirates, and we'll make a bad video of it, and we'll all have it, it'll be fine. And they loved it. It was great, and that was the class that semester. Things continue to be challenging. Oh, here's one thing I did learn. Especially, I think we all learned this one. Conducting a choir while you're wearing a face mask is, oh boy. And
match my vow. I kept saying that. Or not.
For some reason, I decided it would be a lot of fun the second semester to do Chichester songs. And because we needed something upbeat. The choir's a good choir. I was like, they can do this. They're going to be fine. Except we had to perform outside. We had to perform on this patio, with an electric keyboard, this whole 9 yards. And exactly. And that page turn where the tenor basses go, yee, da 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 da, yeah. I was like, I'm gonna do this and cue it, and you're all gonna come in because the page turn. It's one of those. Exactly. And so I did it at the concert. I went nothing. And usually I would have gone like full face, like I've been like, bam, something like that. And they went, and I just went, da 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 da, and then they go.
And for you and I, particularly our facial, it takes a percentage of our expressive possibility for sure.
Exactly. Oh. That's when that singer, they won't know that we're actually mad at them. I mean, are we really we care about them a lot?
It's only in the eyes.
I was conducting the other week, and everybody had a face mask on, including me, and it was a choir I've conducted a lot, but I was like, are they mad at? I can't really tell right now because I'm used to like, people smiling and singing and loving everything, right? And then it's just like, and you could tell they were really frustrated by the face mask, which I understand, totally got, but it's like,
it takes away probably 10 to 15% of the resonance, right? It just
at least.
Yeah, it's just the way it goes. I mean, we'll do whatever we have to do. I mean, like to make music. It doesn't matter.
No, we've got to keep going.
Standing on a T-Rex, with a machine, whatever. I will do it. We want to work. We want to make music, and it's necessary. But at the same time, boy, I didn't miss those masks for a bit.
I haven't been missing the mask. But it does go back. What you just said goes back to wanting to be a professional musician. It's that you got to do it. You have to do music. Like there's nothing else you want to be doing.
You have to bloom in the time you're planted, right?
Exactly.
I mean, and you look at, this is a thing that none of us, this never existed in our lifetimes.
Right.
Or in multiple lifetimes.
Right.
But I guess we have to go back to our predecessors in the Baroque period through those terrible plagues. This has happened before. Yeah. But we've never shut down our major institutions like the Metropolitan Opera, the symphonies, in the history. Yeah. I mean, like you look at the Met or Broadway. They've only closed for a blizzard or 9/11 or for a couple days.
Right.
And a year and a half. I mean, that's unheard of in our lifetime. In the history of these organizations since the 1890s, I guess.
Yeah, it's hard.
We're in unique times. We're in unique times.
And I mean, there are a lot of opportunities that have come out of this because just like the polio vaccine came out of wartime and things like these technologies could get invented. This in a way was a wartime. And, and so new ideas, like for instance, this podcast, and that came out
streaming
of things
technology.
like that.
Can you imagine now like things that are positive? Like I have Zoom meetings every day and I don't need to drive to wherever to go, and I can be in a million different, I was taking Zoom meetings conducting in Buffalo, and I can be on anywhere and manage my organizations and my different projects, and that gives us a lot of flexibility.
There's a lot more flexibility there. I do think, it's easy I've seen some dear friends have to deal with this. I mean, for instance, in the music world, it's easy for us to work nonstop. I mean, I will wake up at 7 a.m. and I make the mistake of checking my email first, and then it's 11. And I need to be at class. Like I should have probably been at school. And I'm like, oh, I have candidates, blah, blah, blah. But then suddenly it's midnight. You're still on the email, right?
Yeah,
so but the same thing, though, goes with, especially with Zoom. And I feel like these days, used to when people went into an office from 9 to 5, they were there 9 to 5. And they could literally leave it. And they went home to their families. But these days, it's incessant. Like a lot of people, I see a lot of like administrators and managers who are like, oh, we can have the meeting at 8 a.m. or
10 p.m.
10 p.m. And we got to meet up with these people, so it's going to be this, but it's consistent, and it seems like it's those boundaries that were set by going into the office and by having those set meetings.
You bring up a great point. How do you strike work-life balance?
It's a choice.
Okay.
It's a choice. It's very easy, and I'll use musicians. It's very easy to become obsessed with success in our industry and feel like, oh God, I didn't do that. That didn't work. Oh no, this person just did this, so now I need to go do this.
It's on social media. I just saw it.
So it's really, and I see so many of our good friends and colleagues who are just, and that's it. That's their focus, and like I did this is something. I'm like, that's awesome, that's great, but when are you going to the beach? Like a lot of people I work with, if I haven't had a beer with them or gone out with them or something like that, I don't have that level of contact. It's that part is so important. They have to have that balance.
You forget how important music's all social too.
It's all people.
I mean, without that, you have nothing.
It's people.
Right? I mean,
that's how it all started. This all started as a social thing. Yeah. I mean, and I was thinking about, so Jason and I were the TAs for the Rutgers Glee Club back in the day.
Yep.
And, and that men's choir tradition came out of English bars. The men wanted to drink together, right? And sing songs, So it was all of that. And singing is communal.
It is.
Singing is people coming together to make to make
nothing as beautiful as a choir. We come together, all of our divisions cease.
Yeah.
No matter where you're from, your culture, that's all. It's all there. But like we with that having that common goal, I think if more people sang, or more people played in orchestras, community-based bands, we'd have a lot less problems. Oh,
I couldn't agree more. I mean, the what music does for communities. We get into this idea. It was called STEM, right? It's now called STEAM, and science, technology, math, and they left out the arts at first. And the arts are what defines a culture. It's not necessarily the technology that doesn't define the culture. It's the art and the society's contributions to the art and the art that they create is what defines their culture. And people forget about that. And it's very easy to do, but with balancing like life and work, I for instance, the 4th of July, I was like, I want the 4th of July to be a thing because I want to feel normal for one day, and things like that. Or this past week, or this past month, I said, I've never been to the shore. I haven't been to the shore in 3 years. I'm going to rent a shore house. And that's when we came.
I'm so glad I got to see you.
Exactly. Then I got to see you. And so I was like, I'm going to rent a shore house and go for it because you know what? Yeah, it's going to cost some money, but got to live some life.
It's nothing like it. There's nothing like breathing in that salt air.
Oh, it's so great.
I work at the beach, so but I always make time to walk on the ocean at night, sit by myself, and just look at the moon over the ocean waves, and that really is cathartic.
It's so important, and taking that time. I mean, so I've gotten very fortunate. I took a church job in Jersey City, in Paulus Hook in the financial area, Our Lady of Czestochowa, and it's a nice little I was thinking about it. It's this nice little church. It's like the complete opposite of the great auditorium, okay? And I think you can fit like 25 little OLCs in the great auditorium. And so, but it's in the middle of that finance district, and so it has a lot of like support. And we're starting an art series. You know, it's gonna be really cool. But it's right on that marina. It's on that Jersey City marina that overlooks the Statue of Liberty.
Beautiful there.
Yeah. And so in between masses, I walk out
Sure.
and just go sit there and enjoy the water. I take pictures of the boats, you know, and
That
things
is
like
a
that.
beautiful skyline.
Yeah, and it's the skyline. It's Manhattan skyline. But you have to take that time. You know, you can't just obsess over what's my next thing going to be. And you have to take time for, you know, your people and your friends, and especially the people in your lives who are musicians who get so fixated on the next thing. Yeah. And you're like, it's okay. It'll still be there tomorrow.
It's always going to be there.
You know, we can watch Star Wars tonight. It's okay. You know, or we could go out, or you know, we don't have to like.
I've been lucky. I've got my boys, my sons, my daughters. Yeah. We'll find things to do. It's like they'll be like, turn off the computer. Now we got to watch. We're watching Reacher. That's the new one.
Yeah, exactly.
Serious art there, but it's a lot of.
We were watching Sharknado back in the day, man.
We've definitely watched our Sharknado. You know what? There needs to be that time to kind of shut off your brain and enjoy the life. And
you come back.
What are we working for?
Well, right. What are we working for? And you come back stronger. You know, I come back much more like after the shore week. I was definitely more invigorated than I'd been a long time. And you know, and then doing the daily nitty gritty of like administration and stuff like it. Just you know, you gotta take a break from it. Yeah. I have my the provost, the guy who was the provost at the time, was also our chair. He's like, your life can't just be be the college. He was like, I've seen that happen to people, and they fall apart. And I was like, yeah, it's true. And so I've taken that to heart, you know. And so I have days where I'm just not there. I'm very fortunate to have this great faculty, and they can do it, you know. And I'm like, you know, when we're on call, you know, things like that. And I'm like, call me if you need me, but you don't need me here right now. You guys have it, and so then I can go do something else. And
when do we get the point where wisdom starts to come into the equation?
Well, exactly, and exactly, and it's you know, and when's the point where you realize you don't have to be there?
Yeah,
like I don't like when I was first building things at Wagner College, for instance, and when I started, they brought me in to rebuild the choir and everything like that, and it was nonstop. It was nonstop, and we have like, you know, and then I oversee the voice faculty, and we have 160 students in voice, and it's, you know, it's a big program because there's a big theater program there, and we had to. I was doing all of it, and I was really very hands on.
Sure. And
this past year, you know, we brought on some great, like I said, some great people, and I was like, I don't have to be like that anymore, and it's one of the most liberating feelings in my life because I realized once I became the burden. Or I felt like I was becoming the burden. I wasn't being productive. I wasn't, you know.
I've gotten really good at delegating the last couple of years. Boy, that's so important. To have people to delegate to, and then, you know, and just sit back and make sure things get done. Yeah. But people are incredibly key. You put the art is putting capable people in positions.
Exactly.
Very important. Tapping the volunteers who are really talented, and you know, if we try to do everything ourselves, it's just impossible.
Oh, it's just another thing. Yeah, and it's just, oh gosh, you know, the list never ends.
I'm blessed to work with such good people in so many different organizations that it only works if you can, like, you know, get people who trust.
The saying, I think, is it takes a village. It takes a village, and but sometimes that's hard for people who are used to being in charge of everything, usually because they have to be, they're forced to, and to get that. And that's when the wisdom comes in, I think, is when people finally realize that they don't have to do it all. But that's a long road.
We're still working on
me too.
Everyone's asking me about work-life balance. I'm like, well, my hobby is music. My passion is music.
Exactly.
It's amazing what you learn on the journey. Like, I love administrating. I love putting projects together. I wouldn't have known that years ago. It's just something the opportunities didn't exist. So I'm like, well, I'm going to make them.
Well, I remember because you had the Summit Music Festival. You had started that, and then was it an opera company? It was.
I founded Mid-Atlantic Opera. Did that for years, and you know, but each one I've learned along the way. You take pieces with you, and you kind of become a better administrator, and you learn to budget better. You learn to put boards together. All these things that are so crucial in making things successful.
Yeah, and you identify those patterns. And you know, this is very nerdy what I'm about to say, but going back to Dune, was a big part of that book is that people learn how to identify patterns. and they can see what's going to happen. And of course, that culminates in Paul Atreides being able to see in the future and things like that. And so, because that's been built into literally bred into them. And so, and that was always very inspiring to me. And I took it to heart because I start to see the patterns, and I'm like, well, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. But I can also guide it so the pattern's going to be fine
in your direction.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. It's going to be okay. Yeah, exactly.
In a career path which is so budgets change every year.
Yeah.
And they don't get bigger, is my experience.
No.
So you're always working with limited means. But the one thing I always tell everyone, that doesn't scare me though, because when you don't have big budgets to work with, talent and creativity has to be the leavening factor.
Well, exactly. That reminds me of, well, first of all, speaking about budgets, I mean, somebody asked me the other day, they said, oh, do you think you're going to get an increase in your budget, or you're doing well? Do you think the budget? And I said, no. You know how I know we're doing well? My budget's not getting cut.
Flat.
Yeah, it's staying the same.
I'm okay with flat.
Yeah, I'm like, it's staying the same.
I can prepare for flat.
Exactly. But talking about, in times of need and when you're, lacking resources and things like that, this is very choir nerd. But I remember when Pat taught us about Heinrich Schütz and the 30 Years' War, and he had to write these smaller pieces of music because all the brass players were all at the war, and everybody else was conscripted.
Sounds hard for brass players. They're manning their guns.
And so but it's like that sometimes, and you have to. Musicians adapt to it through adversity. That's what we do.
You adapt or you take a different job.
Yeah, and it's not always going to be, I mean, we all went into this thinking we were all going to be, I know I thought, oh, great, I'm just going to be Robert Shaw. This is going to be fantastic. I had no idea what I was thinking, except I was just a kid. And a lot of people have these ideas that, oh, I'm going to go be a super famous performer tomorrow. And it just takes so much time and so much patience and working through things like COVID.
I find that if people are going into it to be famous, boy, it's much harder than they think.
Yeah.
And you have to give up so much more. So it's like, and ultimately what you learn when you do this more, is you're a servant. You work with people. You make people happy. And that's really important, is the way you adapt to people and work with people and put people together.
Exactly.
It's most of what we do.
Yeah. I mean, a big part of me, I know, is that I want people to be happy. And like at Wagner, I always say we have a happy hallway. That's what our music department's in a hallway. I'm like, we have a happy hallway. Students are happy. I think the faculty's usually happy. And, but everybody, is pretty happy. Or like in my friendships and my relationships, and certainly with my choirs. And of course, we all have to, but you have to learn that. You can't, because a lot of times you'll come in. I know when I was younger, I came in and I was like perfectionist, blah, 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 blah. But that's just maybe one part of the choral experience as a conductor, and it might not be the most important one. Because I know, and anyone who's a choir director knows this, I mean, one of the most important things, especially to me, in my community choral music, is the friendships I've made with people. And I've known them now for like 13, 14 years, for a long time. And I see how important that is. Or like when I, as a church musician, having my church choir and playing like their weddings, playing the funerals for their families, going through that life. Was while I always wasn't sitting there going, I wasn't planning on doing this, but I realized how important it is in people's lives and in living. And that really, to me, sometimes is more important than conducting at Lincoln Center,
Yeah, I agree. Like sometimes, I'll think back and I'll say one of the most meaningful things post-COVID are like the where we come together with it. It's not necessarily the highest profile, the biggest budget things. It's the things where people really are motivated. You see what really makes people happy. Yeah,
and that's I think people forget, because we always have this construct in our minds about success in music and in art and things like that, and it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be that picture that's been placed into our minds. It is the people, and you start thinking about the artists of the past, so many of them, and how it was a group of people that were really their friends. I mean, I'll use like Ray Vaughan Williams, for instance, who wrote his Serenade for Music for his friends. And that piece is one of the most popular pieces there is, and it's gorgeous and it's very inspired. Or Benjamin Britten, who wrote pieces for his friends, the Round Table, right, and that advanced chamber choir, because they wanted. That's a big thing. Like I
always look at Brahms, who was directing and writing for choirs, just like us. He's out there working with these choirs, making things happen.
His women's choirs, oh yes, and so he wrote all that great music. But a big part of that is you get to make something that's been meaning a lot to me much more lately, and I guess my entire career, but I've been getting to enjoy it more, is getting to make music with my friends. because we usually, as we get jobs, and you have to make colleagues, and you have friends on your who are on your team and stuff like that. But what's really fun is when you have a really good close group of friends, and you can be like, let's do this project, or let's do this project, and that's kind of new for me. And I know you have yours too, and so, but it's so fulfilling. And it's cool because you get to share it,
You get to kind of steer things, and if it doesn't exist, you can make it.
Exactly.
It's exciting.
That's the thing people forget. I know starting out, I always thought, well, I have to get this job, I have to get this job, I have to get this job. And you and I have had many talks about this over the years.
Sure.
And how we were just like, we could just do it ourselves. We could just start it. I mean, one of the most inspiring things about working in New York City is how many things were created for New York City. I mean, let's start with Broadway, or the Robert Shaw Chorale or whatever,
Sure.
and anything like that. And somebody had to create it.
Well, the idea, put it out there, and people are like, this is crazy. It'll never work in New York City. And and there's the Met, or there's the New York Philharmonic, or there's the Broadway industry.
Yeah, and I mean, and it does take perseverance. I mean, I think about this sometimes with some upcoming things. I'm like, oh God, I have to send that email. And I'm like, just send the email, Thomas. Don't worry about it. Just type the email. It'll be fine. And I know we all go through that, it's something you learn. But that
So what do you have coming up next? What are the projects on? I know you're going to Ireland.
We're going to Ireland, yeah. So the Wagner College Choir, we just got back from Italy. So we took a concert tour of Venice, Florence, and Rome. We sang Mass at the Vatican, Saturday 5:00 Mass at the end of May, which was wonderful. Got to meet the Maestro di Cappella, and he was very nice, and he really enjoyed the music. I had one of my students conduct. He was very complimentary of that, so that was pretty cool. And so yes, we have Summit Chorale, which is my community choir. Sings in Summit, New Jersey, rehearses in Summit, New Jersey. We're going on tour. We're going to Ireland on the 21st, and so that will be a lot of fun. So I've been busy arranging a bunch of Irish songs, which are just so beautiful. The
ballad tradition. There's nothing like it.
And they're so simple, and they're just gorgeous, and they're
tug at the heartstrings.
The heartstrings, they're so free. They just are. I've been playing through them. I found all the, it's all public domain now, so you just print it all out. And I've been playing them. I'm like, this is just the nicest. It's like meeting the nicest person in the world. That's how these Irish melodies are. And so I'm arranging them for some friends to sing and for the choir to sing. And now I have to arrange the songs for the pub. And because everybody's like, Thomas, where are the drinking songs? I'm like, oh, okay, all right, well, okay. And so we'll be there. I
sense some published works coming out of this.
Yeah, maybe, I hope so.
I hope so.
I know my publishers would be happy. And that was one thing, with Wagner, building Wagner back up. I had no time to write. And
you look at Bernstein, and he's always struggling to find the time to be creative. And
I was reading. You read some of his biographies, and he was taking pills, so he could stay up till 4 a.m. writing. And his daughter's the biography that she did about her dad. It's just fascinating with those things because you start realizing the toll that it takes, and that's when you do have to make the decisions about life and work, like the balance, and you have to make those choices.
I can't wait to see that movie when it comes out.
Yeah. Oh, it looks. Yeah. Fantastic.
What he looks like.
He looks like Lenny.
Scary. Wow. Go Bradley Cooper.
I teach, yeah, and I actually teach at Wagner. Part of the freshman class I've taught the past few years has been Beethoven and Bernstein as celebrities and as influencers. And Beethoven actually as a political influencer, which was very big at the time. And he was very much, he was very much for Napoleon. And then when Napoleon declared himself emperor, tore off that page. Yeah. And the Napoleon Symphony became the Eroica Symphony instead. But then so we're teaching Beethoven and then Bernstein at the same time. And we had these books about each. And one of them was called Beethoven in America, which traces the American development after Civil War through the lens of Beethoven, which is pretty cool. But then there's this Bernstein book that his brother wrote, and it's different snippets of Lenny's life. And so the big one that stuck out to me, was crazy, was there are 2 chapters in both books about political activism. And
Bernstein was an enormous anti-war activist, sure.
And then there's a big one called in the Beethoven book, Beethoven in the Cold War, and it discusses why musicology became important, and because the government was there was in the Cold War the race in everything, including the sciences, especially in the sciences, right? And the musicologists were like, well, music is a science and should be studied and should be codified and blah blah blah, and the theorists and the government, the United States government, really supported it, and so they have it through that lens, and then they talk about Beethoven and like, remember the watermarks and all that, this, all that stuff, and then on the flip side, literally at the same time, when we in the books, there's Bernstein and his political activism and in the Cold War. So it got really cool because, of course, Bernstein was the one who, when the Berlin Wall fell, he was the one who gave the concert. And so Beethoven 9, where he changed the words, and I think Freude oder Freiheit, right? And so so it was fascinating, to compare those with the students. And they probably were looking at me going like, gosh, Joe, you're crazy. I was like, yeah, but this is so cool. Look. And you could see, we're talking about Beethoven as a political influencer. You could see how much Bernstein patterned his life off Beethoven's. And when you start like comparing the chapters and going through you're going, oh my goodness, like, Bernstein's struggle in his life sometimes mirrored Beethoven's struggle with his deafness. Like, so Beethoven, right, with the Heiligenstadt Testament, where he, admits he's, death. He's
losing his one gift that
his
should
one
be
gift, right? Exactly.
Else's,
Why does God torture me? And then Bernstein with his struggle. So I
can't wait to see how they deal with that in the movie. I'm really curious.
Yeah, me too.
My friend worked for the Bernstein estate. He's a great oboe player.
Oh, yeah.
And he would be taking pictures of him with Bradley Cooper coming to study the archives.
Oh, that's so cool.
I'm like, that is wild. What's he doing there? Lo and behold.
Secret project.
Lo and behold, yeah.
That's fantastic.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So,
well, Thomas, I can't wait to see what the next chapter is for you.
It's gonna be
You have
great.
to come back on the show next. We'll
course.
find another time. Anytime you want to come on, you're a guest, and we're gonna have a great time. We could literally just turn on the camera and talk for 3 hours anytime.
We'll do a late night.
Oh, done.
We'll do it after hours.
We can do movie reviews.
Oh,
we
yes,
do,
we should do movie reviews. I'd be happy to do that.
You come back with the topic. We'll talk about it.
Right, that sounds like a great plan. I love that.
So I wish you continued success.
Thank you, my friend. Same to you.
We have your website. Do you have your own website?
You can just look at the Wagner website.
That's
right?
why I put in there.
Wagner website.
I wasn't sure if I saw one there. But where can people go to find out more about you?
Just type my name in. Just type Thomas Juneau, composer, in Google or in the search bar. You might find my cousin, who is Thomas Juneau, who is a Middle Eastern studies expert who lives professor who lives in Canada. He's the good-looking one, and so not him. And
he'll send over the referrals.
Yeah, but Thomas Juneau Music. Gotcha. We know each other. We found each other on Facebook. It was pretty funny. So.
Well, people, I know you're also very active on social media.
Yes,
people can reach out about if they're inspired by your composition. Reach out.
Yes,
people love to do that.
And Spotify, you can look for me on Spotify and YouTube and iTunes and all of that. You can find my albums on there, and and good
one of the most dynamic musicians on the stage today. Definitely someone to look out for, Dr. Thomas Juneau.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I look forward to our continued relationship as the years go on.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe and check out our past episodes at www.jasontram with 2Ms.net. And remember, keep music alive.